everyone, Richard Lewis here with another video, and it's going to be about a game that we love. Me and Sam both love this game. I supported this one from early access. I've talked about it multiple times in videos, multiple times on my stream. It's called Rimworld. And sure, Sam's dad starred in a movie of the same name.
Good one.
Good one. Got him. Got him. But that's not what we're talking about here. Rimworld is an amazing game. Kind of think, you know, to not do it justice, Prison Architect in a way, in terms of its aesthetic and the fact that it is a management sim, but it's on another planet, a rim world, and you have to basically build a colony, and eventually, in some modes of the game, build a ship and get off the planet that you're stranded on, or just expand the colony and just survive. And the game gets continually harder. And throws things at you, and you have to battle against it. Now, in terms of when we talk about games as kind of like story generators or whatever it is, this game actually does both. Some of the games I've had are just hilarious, like stories that I'll always remember in the same way that you might from a Mad Dwarf Fortress story, just something that you want to tell your mates about, even if they haven't played the game. But equally as well, it's a very deep and layered game. There's a lot going on under the surface, a lot going on under the hood. You have to make a lot of decisions, especially in the early game, about what tech to research, how to manage your workload, how to manage your resources. Even just something as simple as choosing where to establish base camp on the map can have huge ramifications. It's a lot of fun. And it's getting better all the time. It's been continually updated, and admirably so, because the team that are working on this, it is pretty much one guy. But there are others, of course. But it's headed up by a chap called Tynan Sylvester. Now, this has been a darling game of the press for a long, long time. This is something that's been talked about as early access done right. This is something talked about, and it's a wonderful, imaginative game that represents huge value for money. Literally, no two games are alike. It's impossible. You can't replicate it. It just cannot happen. It offers just so much to the people who play it. It's fun. It's entertaining. At times, even borderline educational. I think it's just a masterpiece, and when you consider it's been done on effectively a shoestring budget by a very small team, it really it's one of those things that just underlines how great games can be and how great games development can be. And even the mainstream gaming press, which we know is compromised as fuck, which is filled with a load of wannabe, whining, underachievers who wish they were political essayists instead, and rather than just do the honorable thing and fucking leave and go and pursue that line of work, instead they've infected games journalism with their pathetic soapbox posturing. And it's killed games journalism. It's all compromised. You can't trust any of it. When they rate a game out of 10, something so simple, something that should be consumer driven and focused, you have to factor in the reviewer's personal politics and whether they tessellate or overlap with your own. Because they will give a game that's mechanically a 10 out of 10. They'll give it a 1 out of 10 because it's not diverse enough. This is happening more and more. It's become ridiculous. Games journalism does not serve the gamer. It does not serve the consumer. We know this. Now, that hasn't affected Rimworld until recently. Rimworld has enjoyed great reviews, rave reviews, extensive interviews, extensive coverage. But one of these publications has tried ever so hard, and I'm going to tell you why this has happened. One publication has tried ever so hard to basically besmirch the reputation of the development team, to try and make out that this game is something sinister and evil and disgusting. And it's not, but this is the nature of games journalism. So this is Rock, Paper, Shotgun. And they did an article just yesterday at the time of recording this video called How Rimworld's Code Defines Strict Gender Roles. Now, I'm going to go into this in some detail, but I've played this game. There is nothing strict about this game. It's very fluid. There are no gender roles in the game. I've played as gay male protagonists. One game I had, which was amazing, was like a former gay space pilot that landed on an island all by himself. He only had a pet for company, and he wasn't very good at working. He didn't like manual labor. And we had to really fucking struggle. And eventually he met a dude and they had a thing going on. It was a cool game. It was a great fucking story. But I've played with women that have had, relationships or lesbian relationships, or some women just don't want to fucking be involved at all. I had a game where one of my main characters got attacked very early on by one of the wildlife on the planet when a guard was down. She didn't have a weapon that she could appropriately use, and she lost a limb, and she had incredible horrific facial scarring. And she was just a fucking badass. She was like fucking Ripley in Aliens or something. And she didn't conform to any fucking gender role. She toughened the fuck up and dealt with it. And it rebuffed any amorous advances that came her way, which were few and far between because half her face was hanging off. There's no gender roles assigned here. She didn't cook. She didn't clean. She became a fucking badass and eventually got a bunch of mechanical enhancements to make her better. Anyway. This is the kind of shit that can happen in this game. It's wild as fuck. It's a crazy game. But Rock, Paper, Shotgun, who've written previously positive things about the game, have published what can only be described as a disgusting, hate-baiting hit piece on the developer and on the game itself. And you would ask, well, why would they do that, Richard? Why would they write positive coverage before and then decide suddenly, out of the fucking blue, to rip on it? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Sorry, Sam, I'm going to drop this on you. But if you go to Breitbart, of course, apparently it's a white supremacist publication. It's not. It's just a right-wing outlet. And while I don't agree with everything that's printed on their disclosure, obviously I used to work for them. But they did, Tyne and Sylvester did an amazing 3-part interview over at Breitbart in October. And I recommend you go look at it. Here you go, Sam, if you want to bring up just a link from one of the entries. There's the link there. And it's really deep. It's really good, done by my former colleague, Nate Church, who I've talked about. Again, a journalist that you can have faith in, have confidence in, not compromised. And just a super lengthy interview. He talks about story systems, games development, parallels with other games that are in existence, like The Sims. And indeed, in this interview, Tyne and Sylvester was very vocal about how people can be shamed currently, how games developers get shamed and get pushed. And you can see it on this one here, which was I believe, the final installment of the interview. You can see he said that don't listen to what people say, watch what they do, and you will find developers you can trust. Right? And he's right. Judge people by their actions, not their fucking deeds, not their virtue signaling. As we saw in other videos in this channel, a lot of these social justice warriors are massive hypocrites. Just think the Devon Pharisee video we did, always talking about how if you don't like the new Ghostbusters, you're a rapist. But actually, he's the guy that's accused of sexual assault, and he can't even deny it or defend himself because it turns out he's probably blackout drunk and can't remember it. He had to stand down from his job over it. This is the guy that says if you don't like Ghostbusters, there's something wrong with you. If you're a gamergater, you hate women. It's insane, the level of hypocrisy. So what Tyne and Sylvester didn't realize, and probably should have realized, and maybe he did realize and just doesn't give a fuck. And if that's true, even more power to him. What a legend. As soon as he agreed to do an in-depth interview with Breitbart, that's it. The target's on your back. For multiple reasons. Not only have you done an interview with Breitbart, this forbidden publication. Ooh, it's so evil. Anyone who works for Breitbart must be mentally ill and hate black people and hate women and hate gays. I mean, forget the fact that my boss and dear friend Milo Yiannopoulos was the editor of the section I worked in. Forget that. Forget common sense. Forget facts. Right? And again, as I said, don't agree with everything they do. Don't agree with everything they publish. But they certainly didn't censor my copy. And they certainly never told me to write to their agenda if indeed they had one, which I'm sure they do. Never told me what to say. And I was able to serve the reader as a result of working there. So as soon as Tyne and Sylvester does an interview with Breitbart, that's it. He is targeted. And Rock, Paper, Shotgun, they do not give a fuck. They have got previous. Let me tell you how compromised Rock, Paper, Shotgun is a publication. I mean, I've already done a video on the piece that you've got there, Sam, which is let's talk about CSGO abuse. And for those that don't remember it, this was a writer called Emily Richardson who had literally played, like, I don't know, a few hours of CSGO and was basically mad that she tried to talk to people in-game and some Slavic dude had said, fuck you. And just kept repeating, fuck you, fuck you. And instead of just ignoring them, she continually antagonized them and said, oh, that's great, thanks. Fuck you. Yeah, I got that. Fuck you. Okay, keep arguing. That's good. So she's antagonizing that person. The person doesn't want to talk. I know this is a mad thing for a lot of the fucking progressive, regressive, leftist weirdos to understand. Some people don't play games to make friends. We actually have lives. We can go outside and meet people. You know, we can leave our bedrooms. We're all right with it. We're okay. I don't play games to make friends either. I don't want a conversation with you when we're playing a game of Counter-Strike. I don't want to hear your funny jokes or your silly voices. I want to concentrate on winning the game, and the only communication we should have should facilitate that. But no, she comes in and wants to do it that way and wants to be friendly, and no. Not everyone's like that. But if you're not like that, apparently it's a problem. So I did a video on this article and said how ridiculous it was. I fucking hate what the social justice warriors do, which is they don't belong to a community. They come into a community and then they lecture everyone in that community about how to behave. It's like, you just got here. Fuck you. You do not dictate the rules. That's not how life works. That would be like me, day one, in a new job in the office. These are my values, by the way. And I'm seeing a lot of things that violate these values. What are you going to do about it? Well, I don't know, like, just don't work here then, maybe? No, you will change. You will change to accommodate me. Doesn't matter that 99% of the people are happy with it, and I am a huge minority of one. You will accommodate me, because I will stamp my feet and talk about how my rights are being violated. You got no rights. It's a fucking internet game. Fuck you. And people keep entertaining these mad people. And they are mad. They are crazy. You've got mute buttons. If someone says something you don't like and you realize that they're an idiot, mute them. We all have to do it. Not everyone's going to get along in life. You learn that when you're about fucking 4 years old. And some kid won't share a toy with you in a sandpit. Social justice warriors, though, they can't develop. They don't develop beyond that point. So they were already compromised in my eyes from that article alone. But just to be clear, this is also the article where they had Nathan Grayson over there who gave positive coverage of Zoe Quinn multiple times without disclosing their friendship. And in fact, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, if you look at a lot of their journalists, they've done this quite often. It's a cronyist publication where if you're an indie games developer who happen to know one of the journalists, you can look forward to lots of positive coverage. Lots of positive coverage, and no one will disclose a relationship anywhere. This has worked, for Riot Games as well. You know, like Nathan Grayson, I believe, was also guilty of that. I think he's got personal friends of he's personal friend of several Riot Games employees. He's never disclosed a relationship with any of them, and has constantly written about how great Riot Games are. And in fact, they have a dedicated journalist just to that. And I wonder if any money has changed hands. I really wonder. Then, it goes on. You've got, they attacked Hotline Miami 2. And get your head around this, Sam. You will enjoy this. There is a 4-second scene. 4 seconds. A 4-second scene in Hotline Miami 2, which was declared to be problematic.
Love that word.
Right? Because there's a sexual assault scene. Think about how Hotline Miami 2 looks like, for starters. It's a top-down, deliberately retro-looking game. You know, I remember there was a moral panic about a game called Custer's Revenge. Did you ever see that one?
No.
Custer's Revenge is a game, and it's a disgusting premise, I agree. But Custer's Revenge, I'm going to show you a screenshot of it. I urge you to bring it up. Custer's Revenge was a game where you are General Custer and there's an Indian woman tied to a cactus, I think it is, and you have to have sex with her for revenge because Custer got killed or something. I don't know. I don't even know what the revenge element is. But just look at the image there. I look at that ridiculous 3-pixel hard-on. Look at it. It's just stupid. It's just it wasn't even a mainstream game, by the way. These were these shitty little adult games. To buy these games, you had to like order them out the back of newspapers or not respected computer magazines. You had to literally send off to get these. These were not like mainstream consumption. I already wrote an article about Custer's Revenge and controversy in gaming, how it's nothing new, and how press outlets will try and drive this controversy cycle because it's good for business. But they did that too. They attacked Hotline Miami and this was after just a hands-on preview. And that was from Cara Ellison. There's a bunch. I recommend you go to deepfreeze.it and read up on some of this. But the bottom line is there's a lot of times they don't disclose stuff. A lot of time they give favorable coverage to their friends, to their cronies. And a lot of times they just attack developers out of the fucking blue for making artistic choices about adult content. And that's what's happened here at Rimworld, which is where we're getting to. So a writer called Claudia Lowe has written an article, How Rimworld's Code Defines Strict Gender Roles. And I'm gonna read you just some extracts of this. This is how hard they had to try to find something to dislike about this game, which they only did because not only was he interviewed by Breitbart, but he also said there's a lot of fucking developers that are just, politicized losers. That they're just all about this social justice warrior tip in gaming. And, she talks about the game that she's playing and how one of her characters in the game, I'll just read you the opening paragraph. The character's called Reed. Reed's having a bad day. Her spaceship crashed. She's one of 3 survivors and the other 2 won't stop hitting on her. Well, oh my me, isn't this awful? Imagine being stranded on a fucking... In fact, imagine playing a game where 3 non-existent characters are stranded on a non-existent planet and one's female and the other 2 survivors are hitting on her. Unfortunately for her, she's beautiful, which means they're immediately enamored with her. Unfortunately for them, she's gay, which means the feeling is definitely not mutual. Her life is a constant hellish stream of corny pickup lines and work for the colony. I mean, it definitely isn't. I mean, she's imagined that. There's no...
She isn't real either.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this all comes with a caveat that none of this is real. All of this exists in the mind of Claudia Lowe. But, okay, look, let's just ignore that, right? Let's ignore the obvious. There's no pickup lines in the game. You won't see any pickup line appear up on the screen like, hey, baby. Do you like jewelry?
You like my S-my-D card?
yeah, well, that's for a separate video. But like, you fucking, like, he didn't go, do you like jewelry? Well, suck my dick, it's a fucking gem. You know what I mean? Like, if that was coming up on screen, I'd understand the issue. Like, yeah, probably that shouldn't be in a game. Right? Probably that's a bit weird. You know what I mean? Right? I would understand it then if it was just a slew of Sid the Sexist style one-liners, but they don't exist. They're not real. So she's imagined this. And she goes on to talk about how the pickup lines don't get her down. She receives no penalty to her mood for being barraged by come-ons, but the 2 men, Rob and Boots, feel differently. They have a near-permanent mood and relationship penalty for Reed because they keep asking her out. And they keep getting rebuffed. Now, this is an interesting thing because what she hasn't done here is she hasn't looked within the parameters of the game. I want you to imagine, let's just say you were in it's so fucked up because it's so far-fetched, but just hear me out. So let's imagine you're in like an escape pod from a spaceship in a near future. And, you land on a planet and the situation's desperate and you're feeling lonely and miserable. And there's a woman there. There's a woman and she's only into women, but there's no other women. And you're into women, and she's the only woman. And yeah, you probably would start hitting on her, even though that's not her preference, because, you're lonely, you got needs. You know, instead of taking this as a dynamic of the game, that she's got to be strong and rebuff these advances and yet still find a way to mitigate the relationship and work together for the good of the colony, for the good of the future, and maybe more people are going to find us, you know, we've just got to tough through it. And that's like an interesting dynamic. Shit, there's been films and books and all sorts where that dynamic's at play. Instead of just accepting this as an interesting challenge within the game, an interesting premise, an interesting challenge to overcome, nah, it's tilted. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. She describes it as eerie. Eerie. Right? So they went into the code. I'm not kidding you. I'm not joking. So triggered by this nonsensical problem that isn't a problem, they went into the code and looked at it, and they found that female characters are about 8 times less likely to try and start a romantic relationship of any kind. Now, okay, fine. So there's that. And then they also found that there are no straight women as such in the game. As in, it is impossible within the parameters of this early access, not finished game. There are no women that would only ever be attracted to men. There's always a chance a woman might be interested in a relationship with another woman. There's always a chance. Right? So she says it here. In every single non-gay woman in the game has some chance of being attracted to another woman. But for men, it works differently. And for men, they're either gay or straight. There's no bisexual men, just gay or straight men. Right? And there are no straight women. There's only gay or bisexual women. And this was the problem that she had. Now, I'm just going to get a little bit scientific here for a moment. And you know, this is a study that's been printed. Obviously, you know, I'm very au fait with a lot of gay publications and got a lot of gay friends. Work with a lot of gay people. Have done a lot of gay advocacy, gay rights advocacy work down the years. Definitely not a homophobe. Definitely not a transphobe. Even though there's people who would just absolutely love to label me as those things, but it's absolutely not fucking true. And you will see this study in Advocate, which it says women are more likely to be bisexual than men by quite some distance. Actually, this is from the University of Notre Dame, and the research has found that men were more likely than women to either be 100% heterosexual or 100% homosexual, and that would exist throughout their lives. Women, on the other hand, were 3 times more likely than men to report a shift in their sexual orientation over time, and more likely to self-identify as bisexual. And this was a study that tracked the sexual activity of 5,018 women and 4,191 men as they aged, interviewing them and taking data at ages 16, 22, and 28. It was a very thorough study. Now, obviously, in game code, you are limited. But the idea that it's somehow outrageous to take actual scientific data and try and find a way to implement it into a game, and somehow that's problematic, that's ridiculous. We've talked about it in this channel all the time. Why are liberals anti-science, anti-reason? It makes no sense to me. And it doesn't end there, of course. Why would it? You know, look, this was the study here. It's in Pink News. Just in case you didn't realize, gay publication. I suppose, well, why is pink? Why is it got to be gay if it's pink? They're choosing it. There'll be some social justice warrior that'll attack that. But again, it shows you big graphs. So that's a study from Notre Dame. This is a study from the UK's Office of National Statistics. Men are less likely to be bisexual than women, and men are 5 times more likely to be gay than bisexual, research has revealed. Again, scientific fucking research across a huge sample size. The study finds that across all adults, 1.1% of the population openly identify as gay or lesbian, and 0.5% identify as bisexual. However, the study found that women were twice as likely to identify themselves as bisexual when compared to men. And that roughly correlates with the US study conducted earlier this year, which we found, which women were around 3 times more likely to be bisexual than men and have a more fluid approach to sexuality. This is fucking science. Am I in trouble for saying this? Because this is science. And what Rock Paper Shotgun wants to do is disregard science to make an argument to attack a games developer because they're upset that he did an interview with Breitbart magazine. That is fucking unbelievable. But that is the depths that games journalism has stooped to. And again, the article doesn't end there, right? It talks about age-based attraction and how that's difficult. And again, look, I'll link you to some studies which, talk about how as you get older, and you get attracted to, I think guys stay attracted, like the mean age. They're attracted to younger girls overall as they get older and older, whereas women are more likely to be attracted to an older man, right? And it's kind of the outlier if they're attracted to young guys because they don't have what they want, or what makes them attractive in general. And again, this is studies. Go find them. So she summarizes. Men are about 8 times as likely as women to try and start a romance. Pawns with disabilities will always be found less attractive. I got news for you. That's kind of an unfortunate reality about life in a lot of cases. If you've ever talked to people with disabilities, especially physical disabilities, and if you've ever listened to people that do lectures about it, people do get judged. You do get judged on your physical appearance. It's a goddamn fucking shame that the human race hasn't evolved to a level where we can judge people by their content of their fucking personalities and their soul, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet, and disabled people, it's something that they have to overcome. There was a great series on Channel 4 just recently talking about the sex lives of disabled people and attempt to re-sexualize themselves and establish that they're sexual beings too. And it's important that we understand that. But she seems amazed that this might be a thing in a game. Beautiful characters are always considered vastly more attractive. I mean, imagine that, Sam.
What does that sentence even mean? Attractive characters are always considered more attractive.
Yeah, imagine that, right? And ugly ones considered vastly less. Physical beauty is the only trait that governs attractiveness. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Straight men will always find men unattractive. Gay men always find women unattractive. There are no bisexual men. And sure, that's a little unrealistic. Sam, there's always a guy out there that might turn you, right? Sure. I believe that. I don't give a fuck. I'll say it. But whatever, right?
It's time to get in.
Yeah, me and him have had chats. It's great guy to hang out with and have a few drinks with, but yeah, not my type. Anyway. Women may find women attractive. Gay women always find men unattractive. There are only bisexual or gay women. All men consider partners age 20 to their own age most attractive. If they're under 20, they'll find characters 20 or most attractive with no regard for characters that are a similar age to them. So in other words, if there's some fucking younger characters around there that are attractive and have a great attractive level, they're more likely to go for the young one than the slightly older one, which I'd argue from an anthropological standpoint makes sense as well. Just anthropologically speaking. All women consider partners the same age and older most attractive. Partners slightly younger than themselves are very unattractive, and partners that are 10 years younger than them are always considered unattractive. And again, that's in line with the studies. That's in line with scientific studies. All men consider any character 15 years old themselves to be unattractive. There is no old age cut off for women. No matter how much older a partner is, women have some chance of finding them attractive. Now, again, these are all generalities, and let's not forget these are codes put into a computer game, something that makes no bones about it. It's not like a simulation, but it's trying to apply relatively realistic models. But it's an unfinished early access game. And on it goes. And keep in mind that all we've really talked about over the course of this bullshit babble that has been churned out, like literally when Claudia Lowe squatted and shit this article out, It's how Rimworld's code defines strict gender roles. Well, we're just talking about sexuality for the most part, right? These aren't roles at all. So there's a very interesting point at the bottom of it, and this just shows how disgusting and biased the article is. And I'll never fucking click. After this video, I'll never click on Rock, Paper, Shotgun again. Fuck them. I urge you to do the same. I'll only look at their garbage now if it's behind an archive link. They deserve to go under. They need to go the way of Gorka for publishing this without a fucking apology. If this does not get apologized for, if this does not get retracted, if they don't have the balls to admit that this just was a fucking baiting hit piece on one of the more interesting games developers that we've got active right now, then fuck them. Fuck them for life. It says here, editor's note, the developer was contacted for interview as part of this article, but declined to take part unless we ceded editorial control over the publishing of that interview. We do not cede editorial control to developers or interview subjects, and so no interview took place. The developer has left a response below in the comments and here on Reddit, and we stand by the accuracy of the article entirely. So that sounds pretty serious. You almost think Rock, Paper, Shotgun have some credibility there, because obviously, definitely don't cede editorial control to the people you're writing about. Definitely never do that. I would never do that. Let's just see what they mean by that, though. All right, and also keep in mind all those earlier instances when their friends wrote about Zoe Quinn. Yeah, and fucking all of their mates were getting free coverage, and Riot Games are getting positive coverage. Do you ever think maybe someone had a word in their ears about what they published now and then? Or can you take that line out? Yeah, of course, mate. Do you ever think that happened? I think that happened. I think that's a reasonable assumption. So what do they mean by that? What do they mean? Well, get this. Right? Because Tynan Sylvester, he's a fucking baller. He doesn't give a fuck. He replied in the comments. And he said that basically what they'd done was when they said, he wanted editorial control. Well, he didn't want editorial control. Here's what he said. He said, if you use my quotes, they have to be used entirely, whole cloth, and you may not edit them. It's a fucking quote. Am I losing my mind? Naturally, you shouldn't want to edit a quote or use part of a quote. Or if you ask somebody to comment on a serious allegation, you shouldn't want to abridge or chop down anything that could explain their point of view. You just shouldn't want to do that. And I understand some people might have a tendency to waffle. And maybe you give them a guideline and say, hey, look, can you just be succinct about it, though? Like no more than 100, 150 words. That'll really help us out, but we'll definitely publish it unabridged. No. He asked for his quotes to not be edited and altered in any way. So Rock, Paper, Shotgun's response was, well, you just don't get a quote then. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. That we would rather publish an edited, divorced of context, divorced of you having any control or influence. We would rather publish that to deliberately misrepresent your views than publish anything unedited. And we're going to be petty and spiteful, and we're going to put in the article that you wanted to control the editorial control. It's beyond a fucking joke. That is a fucking disgrace. That is a fucking disgrace. The editor that signed off on that is not fit to do their job. I've worked as an editor at multiple publications. I'm experienced. I know what I'm talking about. You absolutely do not do that. And they repeat that lie. Top comment, Graham Smith from Rock, Paper, Shotgun. The developer was contacted for comment, but refused to participate in an interview unless we ceded editorial control. That isn't what he said. Ceding editorial control would be, I will only give you an interview if you take out these accusations. That's ceding editorial control. What he said was, do not alter my quotes. That is fair. That is reasonable. And then, for what it's worth, I personally think Rimworld is great. We've written many positive articles about it before he went and did that interview with Breitbart. And I don't think this cancels out the game's positive qualities. But I also don't think that being in early access or unfinished means that you can't analyze and criticize the explicit and implicit statements the game is making through its design. There's no statements here. There are no statements. It's a fucking game. Occasionally, a female character will choose to les off. Occasionally, she won't. What's the problem? Why are you looking at the fucking code, trying to find sexism a lack of understanding towards sexuality, which, by the way, as we've shown, the game is closer to reality than it is to this fictional land, La La Land they're living in. It's not like there's no scientific basis for the outcomes that they're trying to implement in the game. So Tynan Sylvester responds and says, I'm the developer of Rimworld. The author of this anger-farming hit piece did email me asking if she could ask me some questions. However, she wanted to edit my responses. When I said I'd be willing to answer questions, but I will not do it if the responses were edited, she refused to get back in touch with me. She went silent. I guess she wasn't willing to print the other side of the story if she didn't have the power to edit it. There's also some blatant lying in the article. The author pretends to not know the things that I specifically told her in our conversation. For example, Claudia wrote, it's a game that's still under constant development, and so this relationship system might well continue to develop and change. On top of that, the various numbers thrown into these governing formulae might well be there because of a late night or as placeholders or just to try and make the systems work. However, in my email response, I said, you should be aware that there are some bugs in the relationship system in Alpha 15 that are already reported and fixed for Alpha 16. You are already analyzing a broken system. This game is just something slammed together to get the game working in a basic way. It's just barely functional enough to fill its role. It's never been intended as any kind of accurate or even reasonable simulation of the real thing. So he communicated to her, we have already changed the relationship system for the next build in the game. She still published this article, and Rock, Paper, Shotgun still let her. What is this fucking madness? What is this madness? I don't know what to say. I don't know how we arrive at a point where anybody at the publication thinks that's okay, where anybody would put that out and not be embarrassed by it. The premise of the article is ridiculous enough. He goes on. Now on to the journalism. The way this is written is disgusting. There's no attempt to get an explanation or understanding of why the code works as it does, and it doesn't. The decision was specifically made to not ask me any question that would help them understand why these decisions were made or comprehend the research or meaning behind them. It's purely written in the style of a witch hunt, which it is. Point at the heretic, maliciously misinterpret everything in the most moralistic, angry way possible, and harvest the resulting anger for clicks. I saw it coming a mile away, which is why I wanted my words to be printed unedited. Is this journalism? No, because it doesn't make the minimal effort to get or present the truth fairly. Is it opinion? No, it's not even an editorial. It's anger farming combined with moralistic witch hunting. It's the worst kind of clickbait. The type that generates anger on purpose when none needed to exist in a community that was perfectly at peace beforehand. Notice how it specifically skirts as close as calling me a malicious person as possible without actually making that claim. And he goes on, and a bunch of people comment, yeah, it's Rock, Paper, Shotgun. Obviously, you're not going to have a lot of sensible people that read that publication, are you? And they're going, a bunch of people going, I'm disappointed. I've supported your game. The classic social justice warrior thing they do. Pretend to be a customer. Pretend to be heavily interested in the thing that you're lecturing the person about and try and make them change it when actually it will never affect or impact on you whatsoever. It's just some pathetic battle for you to fight so you can go back to your clique of socially abnormal human beings and boast and brag about your achievements. That's all they do. Now, I'll draw your attention to the Rimworld official subreddit and the reply that Tynan had there. And he goes, it's a very extensive post. The video is already long. I won't read all of it. But he says there's been a bit of a Twitter brouhaha about the romance system in the game and other discussion. And you will see he's even put a link to the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article, which made its way into the Rimworld subreddit. And, the mods are like, thoughts on the article aside, it's a pretty good debate to have, which is a very mature way of looking at it. And there are some people that are being knee-jerk and reactionary, other people that are being more thought out. And this is the key thing to understand here, that the headline was it defined strict gender roles. It didn't talk about gender roles. Segregated gender roles, as somebody that studied sociology, segregated gender roles is where women do specific things and men do specific things. And this is a phenomenon in lots of societies. And in modern Western culture, we are trying to break away from those segregated gender roles where women do specific things and men do specific things. And lots of people have different views on it. But the general viewpoint is that, women should be able to do everything men can do and vice versa. So when you have a headline, Rimworld defines strict gender roles, you're lying. From the headline onwards, everything in that article is compromised. Because it says here, in the developer's own words, Rimworld scarcely defines gender at all. In Rimworld, males and females are almost entirely identical, physically and behaviorally. They fight the same. They cook, build, craft, and clean the same. They have the same kind of emotional breakdowns in the same situations. There's a psychology model where if lots of negative things happen, you could break, and you can break in a variety of different ways. These are applied evenly to both genders. And the same things affect their moods the same way. They spawn into the same roles of trader, pirate, drifter, ally, and enemy. They all have the same mixes of skills. The only asymmetry is the probability of starting romantic interactions. And even though there are no strict gender roles, women can propose to men, women will hit on men, and so on. Women do all the same behaviors as men. The only difference is that the game applies some probability factors to romance attempts based on the character doing the behavior. That is it. Every character can still do every other behavior. So it's simply wrong to say there's gender roles in the game. So think about how hard this fucking idiot had to look to find the one thing to write the baiting article. Isn't that unbelievable? Think about it. That there is literally an egalitarian approach across the board. And they found the one thing the developers hadn't rectified in time and wrote about it and used it as a platform to castigate and shame the developer. That is just appalling. That is just appalling. And, he even acknowledges here, Tynan thinks bisexual men don't exist. It's true. There's an issue in the game where that behavior won't appear. It's fixed in the next release. As for my personal beliefs, I'm on record specifically saying bi men exist and citing research with this info before this. So yeah, there's just not much to say about it. And on it goes. He picks out studies that back him up. He picks out his opinions. He picks out, very solid arguments to rebuff all of the points made in this article. He gives a very good account of himself. Who doesn't is Rock, Paper, Shotgun, who will not issue an apology for this absolute disgusting piece of trash that is flying under the guise of journalism. They won't apologize for it. They will not retract it. In fact, the editors, as you've seen, has already said we totally stand by it. We totally stand by it, and we think this is a fair critique. So at this point, I got to say I'm done with it. I mean, I've always tried. I grew up with Rock, Paper, Shotgun. I always thought it was one of the better publications. Absolutely not. Because when you go after a developer like Tynan Sylvester, when you attack somebody that's made a game as amazing as Rimworld, you are actually tearing apart the fabric of gaming. There are other developers who will be looking over at what Tynan Sylvester has done, and they'll be thinking, do you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to make a game that might even have anything like that in it. And we are limiting the scope of art and creation to appease a bunch of mentally ill people. And it has got to stop. Because you have to have something wrong with you to look at a game which is inarguably egalitarian across the board, is still in early access and is being developed, to be told by the developer that actually, the thing that you're upset about, the one area in which sexuality is different for men and women and maybe doesn't necessarily reflect your outlook, it's already going to be changed in the next build. And you still write that article anyway. And the editor knows that, and they approve it to make a point. To make a point about their own personal politics that doesn't reflect reality, doesn't reflect the work of the game, and does nothing to serve the consumer, which is the fucking point of their publication. These people are ill. They are fucking ill. And I'm tired of trying to humor these people. You're entitled to your opinion. This is just bullshit. That is garbage. That is absolute garbage. That is an article that, if you'd had any editorial standards, would never have seen the light of day. And to make an allegation of being prejudiced, which is basically the implicit thing, the implicit tone in this article, is a disgrace. And of course, they protected themselves. The one thing the editor can do is remove anything that might make them legally liable. But journalistic methodology, all the fuck-ups, all the errors, the lack of understanding, yeah, that's all fine. That's all right. We'll let that slide, but we'll make sure we don't get a lawsuit over it. So if you like my shit, you gotta fucking just not look at this fucking publication ever again. It's a disgrace. It will hurt your brain. It hurts mine to even have to do a video about it. And also as well, if you haven't already, go on Steam, get a copy of Rimworld. It's a fucking super cheap game. It'll give you fucking hundreds and hundreds of hours of fun. It's being continually developed, and it's a great way to show support for somebody that has actually had the spine, the backbone to stand up to these fucking lunatics. So, there you go. My thoughts on that. God, I wish I didn't have to make a video on it, but these are the times that we live in. So go out, show your support for Tyne and Sylvester, show your support for Rimworld, and I'll see you on the next video.